It's a cognitive dissonance in some ways, because ideally you want to develop a drug that works and give it free to the whole world. Now, realistically, I need millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to make the drug, to get the drug approved, to get it through the FDA, to test it. The people that give you the money don't do it so you give the drug away for free. They do it so they make a return on investment. And so I think these are two totally different things. One is I want the nerve cells to be alive because then people don't get demented. They don't lose their function. That is my goal. But realistically, the people that give me money want money. If I had known how much it took, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Sometimes not knowing what you get yourself into is good. Because, everybody's going to tell you, turn right, turn left, jump up, jump down, jump sideways, jump to whatever. The most important thing was to find a good chief financial officer with public knowledge. Because I could have never in my wildest dreams done all the financial paperwork that we did.
Welcome to the Invisible Ink. podcast. I'm your host, Shubha Chakravarti, Chief Financial Storyteller at Achieve. Our guest for today is Dr. Maria Maccecchini. Maria is the founder and CEO of Annovis, her second biotech company, having sold her first one. Annovis is a clinical stage specialty pharmaceutical company that's committed to developing therapeutics with novel approaches for the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases. She's devoted her life in her 30-year career to the study of these diseases and their treatments. Maria has been a partner and director in 2 angel groups, has sat on the boards of several biotech companies, as well as international and nonprofit organizations. She received her PhD in biochemistry from the University of Basel and is fluent in 4 languages. Now, here's Maria.
Hello, Maria. We're so happy to have you here today. Welcome to Invisible Ink.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So we have a bunch of exciting things to talk about, but just to get started, can you just tell us a little bit about Annovis and what your company does?
Yes. So Annovis is kind of my teenager in the meantime. I've been nursing it for 15 years from inception all the way to here, and we're getting close. Interestingly enough, the analogy of teenager works really well because I think we are 3 years from graduating. So we are one study away to get FDA approval to be on the market for Alzheimer's and for Parkinson's disease.
That's fantastic. Congratulations, and we're cheering you on for that eventual
Thank
graduation. You. So clearly, life sciences is challenging. It's got its own quirks. I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you found your way to a sustainable business model. So first of all, you have a PhD, you come from an academic setting. What triggered the move from academia? What made you decide, hey, I'm going to pursue this on a commercial basis?
Yeah, that is a very, very good question, because when I studied, I was first going to be a professor. Okay. So I did 2 postdocs, a PhD and 2 postdocs. And then I said, I don't think that's really what I want to do. Because when you do research, basic research, you find very novel things, but you don't develop them. They don't become drugs. They remain on the research level. And then 20 years later, somebody else develops them. And they may become a drug, but it's 20 years later. And so I went to pharma, and then I go, this is too big. It's too many layers. It's too slow. So I went to a small pharma, and I was really good. I did really well for this guy. And so I go, maybe I should do it for myself. And that's really how I started the company. And of course, I didn't pick anything easy. I picked nerve cell death. I wanted to protect nerve cells from dying in stroke. And so I'm still at it.
Oh, good for you. So, clearly you had this move, you experimented with a bunch of different paths. So when you started this company, you already knew what it could become, right? So what was your vision? Did you have a concrete vision that said, here's where I want to be, here's how I see the end game playing out?
Yes and no. I thought we were doing Alzheimer's disease, okay? And I thought that I was protecting nerve cells from dying, which really is what I wanted to do in Alzheimer's disease. What turned out, as we did more and more research, is that we were also protecting nerve cells from dying in other diseases. In animals, I can tell you, we do it in stroke, in traumatic brain injury, in glaucoma, in Alzheimer's, in Parkinson's, and in frontotemporal dementia. In humans, it's hard to know whether your brain cells die because I would have to kill you and count them. That's not very doable. But it's interesting that the drug that we invented is expanding into neurodegeneration, which is wonderful because it really helps a number of different diseases.
So is it fair? I'm not a life sciences specialist, but what I'm hearing you say is you wanted to prevent them from dying, but then you kind of moved upstream a little bit and said, before they die, they have to get sick. So why don't we
Yes.
catch them and prevent the damage from happening so that they don't die, as opposed to just preventing death at the end point? Is that?
Yeah, that is exactly right. The earlier you catch them, the less they die, because you're right. You get a little sick, then you get more sick, then you get more sick, and then you die. So yes, the earlier you catch them, the more you can recover them, and they do well.
So I want to expand on that a little bit, right? So you've been working in big pharma, then you move to small pharma, and then you quit, and then you say, I'm going to do this on my own. And then you also talked about all this research. How does that timeline play out? Like, did you do all this research while you were in your startup, or how did it all kind of come together?
Well, when you work for pharma, you're not allowed to do research outside of pharma. Or whatever you think, whatever you believe, all your ideas belong to pharma. By the way, that is not unreasonable because we do that in my company. If you work for us, whatever you think, all your inventions belong to us. So that's normal, which means I had to quit.
Right.
I had to quit my job and do it on my own because otherwise I would have infringed on my employment agreement.
Exactly. And I understand that you have to assign IP like the day you start working because you're using their resources, their knowledge, all that good stuff. So you start now. Are you at that point, were you clear that you wanted to prevent the death of
Yes,
these
I
nerve
always
cells?
wanted to prevent the death of nerve cells.
So
Always.
starting out, let's say day one, you're off in your new office. You don't have money yet. I don't know. Like, what are you thinking about? What were your
Well,
first steps?
we jumped a little. Okay, this is my second company. My first company, though, was the same. I quit and I wanted to protect nerve cells from dying in stroke, not in Alzheimer's, in stroke. Wanted to protect nerve cells from dying in stroke. And so after 9 years, that didn't work. Needless to say, there's still no drug that protects nerve cells from dying in stroke. But we sold the company as a genomics company. And so we made money. And then I retired for 8 years. Then I got bored and I started this company and I wanted to protect nerve cells from dying in Alzheimer's disease. Now, you said no money. The first time around, I had $150,000. The second time around, I had a bunch of millions from my first company. So it was a little easier, but a lot longer because I spent the first 10 years of this company making a salary of $40,000 a year. I put in more than $3 million in cash into the company. So by the time we finally had some human data, I was pretty broke.
Wow. So it looks like we should have a whole other episode on the first company, but we'll try to make it an omnibus conversation. So you had this earlier company for 9 years. That was a successful exit. What were the biggest challenges in your first go around that you found that you could better handle in your second, at bat?
Do you want to know the truth? It
Yes.
was the other way around. My first go around was a lot easier. The investors still believed in biotech. And they still thought that if you have a few mice, they're worth something. Now, nobody believes anything. Too much has failed. Mice are not considered a model for anything, especially in Alzheimer's. Everything fails. Why would I not fail? So actually, the second time around was a lot harder. Harder. I really didn't think so.
So it was against, like, it surprised you, it sounds like, in terms of how hard it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running into walls all the time. Like 2 weeks ago, the New York Times had an article on cheating in Alzheimer's. And a guy who was in charge of CNS or brain at the NIH had to retract over 50 patients. The guy who was the dean of Stanford had to retract papers. A company had to retract papers. They actually manufactured their Alzheimer data. The people that invented over 15 years ago that oligomers are toxic, the papers were found to be fake. So if all these great people, great positions, very famous names, if they all cheat, why wouldn't I cheat?
Wow. So it feels like you were living in a more trusting or optimistic time the first time you built
Yes,
your...
much more, much more.
And then
This
what,
time,
like,
nobody believes a word.
so we're talking like 15 to 17 years between the time you started your first
Yeah,
company and the time you started your
yeah.
second company.
Yes, yes.
And by the time this rolls around, things have dramatically almost changed
Yes.
180 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, we still have bubbles. Remember, people jump into AI. People jump into, mostly AI now. Okay.
Now, before it was crypto or Web3.
And I mean, AI is good. Remember, every time we have a bubble, it's not that what is in the bubble is bad. It's just that it gets hyped up and then it crashes. We still have bubbles, but Alzheimer is definitely not a bubble.
That I can agree with. So then this is fascinating. So you sell your company, there's an 8-year gap where you said you were retired and you still decided to take a leap into this other company. Now, clearly you had some resources. Were you aware of, like, how were you keeping track of what was happening in the landscape during this time that you were retired, and what triggered the move to go back?
That's a good question. It wasn't easy to come back, to be honest, because as you just said, you kind of lose track. But the other thing is also how people perceive you. If you have not been around for 6, 7 years, and all of a sudden you show up, they say, "What are you doing here?" And I mean, we have a brain. We have, hopefully the brain still works. You learn and you move. It's not. I just at some point realized that I was getting really bored. Retiring then was just worth it.
Okay. And so you basically came back to your first love and said, hey, I've done something, but there's still big problems here that need to be solved. Do you think you have a shot at solving it?
Yeah. And I didn't succeed. Remember, I did not succeed in protecting themselves from dying. I succeeded at making money. That's two different things.
It's a very good point. So what was different? Was there anything different about your strategy or your approach that you learned from your first time around? How did that whole experience inform what you're going to do with Annovis?
Well, number one, I learned that having a laboratory is very expensive and is not practical. Okay, we had a large lab in my first company. And as I said, it's very expensive. You need more than a few people, because if you just have 3 chemists, it's not enough. You need a team. So we didn't. We are farming pretty much everything out. We have several offices here, a bunch of offices, but we don't have labs. So number one, I'm a lot more virtual this time around than the other time around. Number two, I was wrong. I thought it was going to be easier. Instead, it's harder.
Got it. And what would you say is unique about how you're approaching this versus maybe how the rest of the industry is approaching it? And secondly, how are you addressing this cheating aspect, the headwinds that are coming up where there's more suspicion?
Well, the cheating aspect, I try to give people real good data. And what is really disheartening is the FDA believes it, and the Wall Street doesn't, which is totally bizarre. Anyhow, so, about the cheating, we just have to let it blow through and show good data. There is really no other way. Saying I don't lie doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're
So
saying.
just need good data. So we need to raise money and move forward. In terms of how we are different, yeah, that's an interesting thing. So when a brain gets injured, a nerve cell gets injured, what happens is that it forms toxic proteins. They've tried to fight off the injury, but because there is really nothing there, I mean, the brain is intact, it just gets hit, but there are no bacteria or something. All these toxic proteins accumulate and they become toxic to us. They turn against our own brain. And there are several toxic proteins. Now, most people have heard of plaques in the brain. That's Alzheimer's. It's part of Alzheimer's. It's not Alzheimer's. Some people have heard of tangles. That's also part of Alzheimer's. And again, it's not Alzheimer's. And then some people have heard of Lewy body. Lewy bodies are part of Parkinson's. But we are separating and saying this is here and this is there. It's not true. Everything is everywhere. So we have plaques, we have tangles, we have Lewy bodies in an Alzheimer brain. And so you have to remove them all. What pharma has been doing is being very specific for plaques or tangles or Lewy bodies. And that gives a very, very small improvement, not a big improvement. And what we are doing, and the preliminary data prove that, by removing all 3, We actually also removed TDP-43 aggregates. By removing all 4, we have much better data.
So in other words, you're kind of hitting at a much more root cause remedy
Yes.
that improves the delta of improvement much more than just maybe a downstream, affecting a downstream effect, like a plaque or... Is that a fair characterization?
Exactly. Because when the brain gets injured, it makes all these proteins and we take them away. At the beginning, when it gets injured, we don't wait until they form these aggregates.
Got it. So you made a very interesting remark earlier, which is, FDA believes it and Wall Street doesn't believe the data that you come up with, which kind of suggests to me this tension between commercial and the scientific, which you have to deal with head on, just given what you do. How do you experience that, and what's your approach to tackling that conflict?
I'm not sure it's a conflict, except
tension.
that no, it is. It's a cognitive dissonance in some ways, because ideally you want to develop a drug that works and give it free to the whole world, right? Okay. Now, realistically, I need millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to make the drug, to get the drug approved, to get it through the FDA, to test it. And that costs $100 million, okay? So the people that give you the money don't do it so you give the drug away for free. They do it so they make a return on investment. And so I think these are 2 totally different things. One is you want to develop a drug because you believe in the mechanism. You believe it protects nerve cells from dying. That's why I want to develop a drug. I want the nerve cells to be alive because then people don't get demented. They don't lose their function. That is my goal. But realistically, the people that give me money want money. Pharma is not going to make it for free if they sell it, right? So I'm not sure. That's why usually the scientist is not the one that sells it. The scientist invents it, and then somebody else does the sale. Like, they're 2 different modalities.
But you bridge that, right?
I'm not selling anything. I don't have a drug yet. We're still developing it. Yes. However, the sales I have to do is sell the company and the drug to get the money to do the studies. Yeah, that's the sales I have to do.
Got it. So that actually brings up an interesting question. And you mentioned this, I think, briefly earlier. In what way does your life sciences company differ from a typical other company that is in life sciences and is actually trying to sell drugs? Is there a fundamental difference in the business model and approach?
Not really. Okay. Basically, what we all do, independent of what we do, we go ask people, give me money so I can do the next step. Because it's a long, long, long process. Just today, we had a news release that said we enrolled the 2 first people into a 750-patient, 18-month study. That takes forever. It costs a ton. Okay, but today we enrolled the first 2 patients. So we're very happy about that.
Congratulations.
And for that, I need to sell money. Okay, so what is different about me and a whole bunch of other companies is more the length. I have survived for 15 years, and we are close to commercialization. We have 3 years from commercialization. Usually, companies, if you try to they're much earlier on. And the trouble is, and that's why the street is right about not believing a word, the trouble is that 90 to 95% of us die. They just die.
The companies, you mean, the startups that are trying to commercialize the drug and take it through the approval process. So it just ups the risk, which means that it ups the return that they're expecting from you. Because
well, I think it lowers the risk because we have done 1,000 patients already. We have a ton of data. But the FDA wants 1,500 patients total for Alzheimer's and 1,500 for Parkinson's. So we are still 3,000 patients away from 2,000 patients away from both diseases. Do you see what I'm saying? The problem with smallish, our studies are not that small, but with smallish numbers is that they could be skewed. You could see statistical significance where there is none because of chance.
So you're laying out, it's a tortuous path, it's an arduous path to getting to commercialization, but it feels fairly well known. I mean, you have to go through these toll gates. Yeah. You know there are risks at every point where you might have to go back and redo things. Yeah. Has any of that changed, or did any of that evolve or turn out to be different than what you expected when you started? For example, Did you have to enroll more patients than you expected? What were some of those?
Well, the FDA wants 1,500 patients. You can stand on your head and wiggle your toes. The only way you don't have to do that is if it is an orphan indication. That's why a lot of people do orphan indications. But in large indications, you just need a lot of people.
And what is the difference between the two?
Orphan indications, there are less than 250,000 people in the United States. So if it's a rare disease, okay. But, 250,000 people are not a lot of people. And very often small companies go for indications that have 40, 50, 60 patients. So they are easy in some ways. They're not easy because you have to get every patient in the world.
So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you knew what the path was and you knew that inherently the outcomes were very widely distributed. I mean, the FDA could come up and say whatever, and you really couldn't control it. You couldn't really predict it too much, and you are bound by whatever they say.
I think the FDA can say whatever. The FDA is actually quite consistent. The FDA wants you to do a lot of people because of safety. Remember Vioxx, or even talcum powder, for heaven's darn sake. If not, millions of people had used it, we would have never figured out that it could cause cancer, right? If just 3 people use it, it would not cause cancer. So the FDA has always said you need to do a lot of patients. That has never changed. The FDA has always said you need a study that shows efficacy. That has not changed. I didn't think it was going to be that hard. That is the difference. It's maybe my underestimation of reality.
So the hard part was finding the patients, or the hard part was?
No, the hard part is finding the money.
Finding the money. Okay.
Finding the patients is not hard. They're so thankful because we give them an option that is simple. We give them a 1-a-day pill. That's it.
Got it.
Whereas other indications, they have to come in for infusions. They have to come in for a lot of machines like MRIs, like CAT scans. And we just say, come in. Once 1-a-day a pill, then you go home and you come back when you have no pills left.
Before we dive back into our conversation, I want to tell you about Seed to Success. Seed to Success is our community letter with our proprietary insights on startup financial storytelling, tips, new episodes, and much more. If you find these discussions helpful in your entrepreneurial journey, use the link in the description to subscribe to Seed to Success today and get all of these and much more straight to your inbox every week. Now, back to our conversation. Got it. So we've talked a lot about how important funding is and the huge numbers involved here. Can you just at a high level walk me through what was your expectation of how much you would need at different points in the journey, and how did that actually relate to what turned out to be the real need? Was there a difference there?
I think I underestimated the cost because I thought you could do it with $20,000 to $30,000 a person, when in fact it costs $100,000 a person. So a 750 patient study costs $75 million.
That's a lot of money.
And the way that is that you pay the doctor, you pay the nurse, you pay the statistician, you pay the medical monitor, you pay whoever. You pay the nurse that weighs you, you pay the person that collects your urine, you pay the person that asks you all the questions. And I calculated it. It takes one person in staff to treat 2 people. So for a 750 patient study, it takes over 300 people to service that study. And I never knew how many regulations there were, how many people it takes, because also the responsibilities are very, very slim. One person does this, one person does this, one person. You don't have a person that just does everything.
Is that different from the last time around that you did this?
I did not progress that far. I started much, much earlier. I only went to phase 1. Now we are in phase 3. And phase 3 are very complicated studies, even when they're simple.
Got it. So it is more a question of you're now progressing much further than you went in your last startup, and you're discovering a lot of these facts for the first time. So now clearly the funding need has multiplied, right, compared to what you thought it was going to be. So what did you think you were going to do? What is your fundraising strategy before you kind of discovered all these new realities? And then how did you evolve your strategy over time once this kind of...
I just take one step in front of the other. I mean, look, we just closed on financing and we started to study the next day. What do you want me to do? It was really kind of short. I mean, we had money in the bank, but the money in the bank wasn't enough for the study. So no, you just do what you have to do.
And from a perspective of like our life science founders, that means just going to the traditional VCs and other funders?
No, VCs don't pay me at all. See, that was when you're private, you have VCs. We needed too much money because Delaware Crossing or Robinhood, the small funds, okay, they don't have enough money to do a $50 million study. So at that point, I had to go public. We went public, and now I can raise money on the street. But that's why the street is much less kind. They are really brutal. And after they read this article in the New York Times, they were really brutal.
So now I know you raised angel funding early on. Can you walk us through what your fundraising journey was and how you made the decisions at each point?
Yeah, I think my very first money came from Ben Franklin in Philadelphia. And then we had a little from Delaware Crossing. We had some from Robinhood. We had some from some others. And then I put in a bunch of money. And then we started getting slightly bigger investors, but still individuals. And then at some point, I realized that in order to do human studies, not animal studies, I needed a lot more money. And so 6 years ago, we decided to go public. And we did.
And what was that process like? What kind of preparation did you have to do personally as yourself? And what kind of changes had to go through in the company for you to be kind of IPO ready? What was that process like?
If I had known how much it took, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Because my board, right, when I said we're going public because I can't raise enough money as private, they told me you are a PhD, you can't go public. And I go, okay, fine. And so we went public. But that was my board, okay? So sometimes not knowing what you get yourself into is good. Because, everybody's going to tell you, turn right, turn left, jump up, jump down, jump sideways, jump to whatever. The most important thing was to find a good chief financial officer with public knowledge. Because I could have never in my wildest dreams done all the financial paperwork that he did. That was the most important thing. And then you need the lawyers, you need the bankers, you need the auditors, you need more lawyers, you need more auditors, you need more bankers, you need more consultants. It's not per se difficult. You can handle everything. It's just a lot of stuff you don't think about. Dotting every last I and crossing every last T for the last 3 years because they had to go back and audit all the financials of the last 3 years, digging out all the data, all your correspondence with the FDA because they want to make sure that what you say your correspondence was. So it was just a lot of work. And yeah, I think the financial is the most important.
And how long did that whole process, from the day you decided that you're going to go?
About a year, maybe a little less. I would say 10 months.
And was that pretty much what you expected in terms of this is how much time?
No, I thought it was going to take 3 months.
What was the biggest learning from the whole IPO experience for you?
Well, it's really what I'm still kind of trying to learn now as a public company. We have to file with the SEC every 3 months. We have to file a ton of paper. And I go, but we just did. Not much changed. Well, forget it. You still have to file it. It's paper. It's just that they have been trying to keep people from cheating, right? And so they keep dumping more regulations on the people that don't cheat. Because the ones that cheat, they figure out how to get around it anyway.
So it just increases the cost of compliance to everybody else.
Yeah, the cost of compliance is ridiculous, if you ask me.
So there's the administrative burden, which is you have to hire people and they've got to go through all these reams of paperwork. What kind of a demand does it place on you as a CEO in terms of being public versus being private? How has that changed your life?
I have to read it all, but because I have to sign it.
Yes.
But that's not the burden. The burden really is that I've become a public company and people think they can criticize me for everything. I mean, I give out data and some person who has no clue says, I don't believe it.
So there's a different, and I'm trying to understand this because you're one of the few CEOs we have here who has gone public. So I'm going to make use of it. So, there's a piece around, you're answerable to investors, you have your report outs, you have your board clearly, and you're answerable to them. So there's that level of scrutiny and that level of accountability, right, for transparency. I get that. But then all this data is public, so you've kind of exposed yourself or your data to other kinds of criticisms, other kinds of scrutiny, which when you say people feel like they criticize you, like what part of the people are you talking about? Are you talking about like other medical experts? What are we talking about?
No, the medical experts don't say anything. It's the street. It's the people that buy 10 shares. They compare me to another company and says, this and this company said that and that, and how could you possibly do this? Some people have said the drug is too good to be true. It has to be snake oil. It's stuck.
Got it. That makes sense. So you mentioned that you were just a short 3 years away from graduation and completing the successful trial. We're definitely behind you, wishing you well. What's the next step then after that? What happens once you complete
the next step is really being done with this trial. So the study we just started today, actually we started it yesterday, but we had the news release today, is an 18-month study that we look at the data at 6 months. At 6 months, it will give us short-term efficacy. Because what we saw in our smallish study, is that our drug works beautifully short-term. So people ask me, what does it work long-term? Well, I don't know. In mice it does, but in humans, I only tested it short-term, right? So the first 6 months confirmed the short-term efficacy. Then it continues for 12 months, and the 18-month study will then tell me if it works long-term. And so this is, as I said, a 750-patient study, 18 months, which takes 3 years. And after that, we will know short-term and long-term. If it works short and long-term, that's amazing, because right now there is no drug that does that, none.
And then you become a very attractive acquisition candidate for...
by then I will be a very attractive acquisition target, yes.
And hopefully become very rich, which you're again rooting for. So
that's not what I'm shooting for. And then we want to do the same for Parkinson's, okay?
Yes. So you can go on and do, conquer more diseases and save more nerve cells, whatever floats, whatever.
Yes, no, I tell you, I want to do Parkinson's. I want to do Lewy body dementia. And I may want to do ALS and MS.
That's fantastic. I had a relative who passed away from ALS, so I'm definitely rooting for you. So looking just to round out this whole fundraising journey, right? It's been a long journey. You had your first startup, now you have this startup. What are some of the big takeaways in terms of funding journey for you personally? How did you transform yourself from a scientist who speaks scientific language to a business person who speaks the financial and commercial language?
Yeah, maybe I'm still not that good at it. I mean, I really try to simplify things, and I'm told I'm good at that. However, where I'm really not stellar is in selling. Okay, because I see other people that have less than we do, and they're better at getting money than we do. And I'm not sure why exactly, but there are definitely people that are better at getting money than I am. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean I don't get it. I mean, I got it. And our accountant has been with me for 15 years. And in the meantime, she knows that I've always gotten the money. She has always paid, no matter how bad things were. At some point, the money just comes. But I really think that some people are better at getting money than I am. And it's credibility. It's maybe being able to hype better. It's not explaining better. I've gotten very good at explaining, but somehow I'm also told I may be too honest, okay? Because I will tell you it works here, but it didn't work there. In fact, I just told you it works beautifully short-term, but I don't know what it does long-term, right? I could have just said it works. But then I would feel that I'm dishonest.
Got it. And to what extent has having this really experienced CFO helped you make that sale and translate any of this stuff to the street that maybe you didn't feel as comfortable doing or wanted to do?
Still honest. I mean, I still say it works here and doesn't work there. So I don't think I can change. And see, the way I see it is in the end, okay, I may have more problems raising money now. Okay? But in the end, what counts is, will the FDA approve the drug or not? So if I tell you it works and then it turns out it doesn't work at 18 months, well, it didn't work, right?
So it's a question of what's your time frame, and you're
Yes.
shooting for a long
Yes.
enough time
Yes.
frame where
Yes.
your words are going to get proven out and they kind of go hand in hand versus here's what I'm
Yes.
telling you and therefore I
Yes.
can get a higher price for whatever that means.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now I want to just talk briefly about your personal journey. We've talked a little bit about you having to make multiple transitions. I know you've also had to move countries. So what are the biggest transitions that you had to make personally going from your initial academic focus to where you are today? And how did you make those transitions successfully?
I think it came from me wanting to do something all not by myself. I have a great team. I can't develop a drug, but having my own project and taking it all the way to fruition. And that's really what I'm doing. It's going to take me 18 years, God forbid, but it's starting with a drug, doing all the animals, doing all the humans, getting it through the FDA, and then actually getting it on the market. I think I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to take something from the beginning to the end. And it took me longer than other people. You look at the people that make money in AI or in chips or whatever, and they're all much younger. But yes, it took me whatever it took me.
But it sounds to me like what really kept you going was this immense clarity about, I want to take it from point A to point B.
Yes.
I know it's a challenging process. I know it's a long process, but whatever curveballs get thrown at me, I'm going to just handle them in service of this North Star. And that's...
Yes, absolutely. The second company, I was very, very determined to take it to the end. The first company, I wanted to protect nerve cells from dying in stroke, but I didn't have a very strong feeling about where to go. And then it didn't work and it didn't work. So that made it kind of easier to stop. But in this case, I really said, this is my second chance of protecting nerve cells from dying. And I want to do it.
Got it. That makes sense. And to what extent has your personal background shaped your entrepreneurial journey? How has it shaped what you've done?
Well, I grew up in a conservative family where my mom thought that the boy was going to study and the girl was going to get married. And my mom had 2 miscarriages and 2 boys. They were both dead. So I was kind of the wrong sex, okay? Because she wanted this boy to be grandiose, and she was going to shine in his limelight. And so I somehow took over, just very different from the way she thought. I was very good at math, and I was the ultimate nerd. I was the nerd at school, was the best person in school. I always had A's. And my mom kept telling me that men don't like intelligent women. I was never going to find a husband. I said, I don't care. So I, in some ways, took over what her son was going to be, but differently. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a doctor. I want to be a scientist. That's not shiny. That's grubby, okay? Because when I was 21 or so, I decided to grow cockroaches and termites, okay? I took home big jars full of termites and stuck them in my room. She freaked out. I mean, it could be more grubby than that. Now, they didn't escape. They were very well contained in this glass jar, and there was Vaseline around, and I would feed them, and she freaked out. So she never came into my room. So in some ways, I took over what she wanted. She wanted a very, very successful son, but I took over in a field where she didn't understand.
Was she ever in your way? Like, was she ever?
Oh, all the time. She always told me to stop studying and find a husband.
And how did
That's why I came to the United States. It was much easier.
So you essentially ignored it. You decided to craft. But how did you pick up this message that that's what she wanted from a son? I mean, I assume you don't.
She told me all the time. mean, she didn't tell me. She kept saying, if I had a son, he would be a lawyer or a doctor.
How did that make you feel?
So I didn't want to be a lawyer or a doctor, but I figured it out
Did it ever upset you that,
all the time.
and you decided to don't get mad, get better, right?
Oh, no, I got mad. We
Yeah.
fought all the time. My mom and I fought a lot.
But a great outcome came up, and I love it. So one
No,
of the
but
things,
see, I had a dad who was a lovely person. My dad supported me with the termites, with the cockroaches.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think it's the best story we've heard so far on this podcast. One other thing you mentioned is, how important it is to be a contrarian. I've heard you say that in the past. Can you talk a little bit about how that has played into your journey and into your life, especially, with this entrepreneurial journey in terms of being...
Well, look, if I wanted to have an instant success Alzheimer company, okay, which would have never developed the drug, but had a pharma deal, I would have done A-beta antibodies. Because all the companies, all the small companies got funded by pharma to Alzheimer antibodies. Now, they don't work. That's a minor detail. But it's what pharma wants, right? And I've always seen, I think it's because I'm very curious. I just like different things, cockroaches, whatever. Contrarian, I'm not sure. It's just that I don't, okay, maybe it's contrarian is the wrong word. It's just that when people all believe in something, I go dig. I say, why does everybody believe in that? And then I form my own opinion.
So it's intellectual curiosity more than...
Yes, it shows curiosity more, yes.
More than contrarian.
But then I don't mind saying, no, I don't believe it. I believe something else.
But what drives you, it feels like, is not the drive to be a contrarian, but it's the drive to know the real answer,
Yes,
regardless
yes.
of where that may
Yes,
land.
because I just looked up high fructose corn syrup.
And?
Okay. It's sugar.
Yeah.
It's sugar. What are we talking about?
Well, that's always known, right? That it's sugar.
Well, yeah, but we say it's so unhealthy. You know what the difference is between high fructose corn syrup and sugar?
I don't.
I didn't either until I don't know why I looked it up. Somebody said that Goff syrup was healthy, and I don't book it. Sugar is 2 molecules. This is sugar, right? Glucose, sucrose. No, fructose, glucose. Goes into the stomach, and in the stomach, enzymatically split, and you have the 2 molecules separate in the stomach. But in the mouth, it's 2 molecules. Okay. Well, high fructose corn syrup is 2 molecules. You stick them into a solution where they get split, and then you ingest them. In the stomach, they're identical. You know why they do that? Because it tastes sweeter.
So there's no difference between sugar and...
Split it before it goes into the stomach. If you split it in the mouth, which the mouth cannot do by itself, it tastes sweeter. That's why they split it. But in the stomach, it's exactly the same.
So health-wise, it has the same impact?
It makes no difference.
I learned something new today for sure. So thank you for educating me.
People talking about.
So you dig in and you find the answers. That makes sense.
And no, I'm not diabetic or anything, so stuff like that doesn't really attack me. So I think I looked at it because somebody was talking to me about how healthy agave syrup is. And in fact, agave syrup is very unhealthy. It's very unhealthy. It ruins your liver. And you know why?
I don't.
Told you sugar is 2 molecules, 1 fructose, 1 glucose, but it's half and half. Agave syrup is 80% one and 20% the other. And the 80% of that attacks the liver.
Oh, so there's more of the stuff that attacks the liver than the other stuff. I learned something else today. Thank you. I will not try.
One is healthy, the other is unhealthy, and nobody knows why.
Now I know why. So we're already better
Don't
off.
eat agave syrup.
I won't. So then
Anyhow, this was more fun. That was not your official interview.
Oh, no, this is all good. So then kind of coming back, you've kind of painted a really fascinating picture of how both your personal upbringing and your own mental makeup helped draw your path, right? Is there anything you'd say to your younger self today that you would do differently, or that you know now that you didn't know before you started doing all these things?
Yes, I would tell myself I was pretty because, no, honestly, because of the fact that my mom thought I needed to be beautiful to attract this wonderful guy and get married. Okay. I walked like this. I wore an apron all the way until I was 17. I was the ultimate nerd. You can't be more nerdy than that. And I thought I was ugly. Instead, I look at my pictures. I was pretty.
You are, for sure.
So it just took me forever to come out of this because I knew I was intelligent. I knew I was going to make it with my brain, but I did not think I was attractive. I did not think I could talk. Well, I mean, talk physics, okay, but not talk. Do you know what I'm saying? And I would tell myself going back, you were a hell of a lot better than you felt.
And how would that have changed your life if you had done that?
I would have been more secure. Maybe I would have worked less.
And maybe we won't be here today. So who knows?
Exactly.
We definitely want you to
Exactly.
So today you talked about some of the challenges already, right? In terms of the field being harder to break into with all of these challenges coming up. There are other issues as well in the current environment that may be not as friendly to women in STEM and life sciences. What do you think will help a woman founder in STEM and life sciences be more successful in the face of all of these challenges?
You know, now especially where we have a new administration and we're cutting back on helping minorities and women, I'm not sure we are a minority, but anyhow, it's really hard because I can slice it any way I want and it's not helping. Let me explain what I'm saying. If you help me because I'm a woman, I may not be that good. I may be that good, but I may not be that good. And if I'm not that good, then you help me and you shoot yourself in the foot and I shall shoot myself in the foot because in the end, I'm going to fail. If you don't help me because I'm a woman, I may not make it, even though I'm really, really very good. So the question is, what's the right way to empower, promote, and help minorities? Because just saying we need 10% of this and 20% of that is not helping. Then you hire people and they fall through. And then you say, oh, they're all stupid. No, they're not all stupid. You hired a person that didn't quite fit the job. You know what I'm saying? And that is a really, really tough question. And I don't have a good answer. I really don't. Because no matter how you do it, you would want to help a little bit, but not too much. And you don't have a crystal ball when you help people, right? You may help somebody who is clueless. If you let them develop themselves on their own, then at the end, whether they were clueless or not, but you may have lost a few in the way because they got no help. So I don't know.
It's a challenge between false positives and false negatives.
Yeah.
Right? So you talked about the other side, which is helping women founders. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the flip side, which is you being a woman founder. Is there anything you do differently in today's environment or that you would advise people who are starting out companies in life sciences or in STEM?
Well, first of all, I will tell them do not ever base anything on being a woman or a man. It doesn't matter, being gray or blue or yellow. It does matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter. But if you put your emphasis on that, you already single yourself out as different. So that doesn't help. The other thing I would say, the younger generation is more self-secure. I appreciate that. I see a lot of girls that have more self-confidence. And even if they got it from sports, it doesn't matter. You know, I couldn't even do sports. I could only read books, okay? So it doesn't matter where they get it from. But it really helps to be more self-confident and put yourself out there. I would also say one of the things that my generation had a harder time with is failing is okay. Failing is okay. And now today, failing is okay. In fact, you say it's my experience. The other thing is we are a rich society. I know we'd say about this, that, and the other, but we are a rich society, okay? you can afford to fail. And even if the government changes, there's always going to be money out there for startups. There's always going to be some money out there for startups.
So what I think I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you focus on the substance of what you're trying to do. You get your self-confidence from whatever source works best for you, whether it's sports or whatever else the case may be, but stand strong in your own competence, ensuring that you've earned that competence.
Yeah.
And then be prepared to fail, because in this society, chances are you're still going to survive and live another day to fight another fight.
Yeah, that is a very nice way of putting, be prepared to fail and don't take it personally. And of course, you're going to take it personally, but move on, okay?
Got it. Awesome. So you gave us a lot of insight and amazing amount of rich observations for a life well lived. Is there anything I should have asked or anything else you want to add that we didn't talk about?
The interesting thing is that in a lot of ways, and we talked a little bit about curiosity. I'm still a kid. I mean, I went to Portugal with my brother and his wife and his little girl. He has a young kid. And we went on a trampoline. And here I am, okay, 70 years old. I jumped, I did somersaults on the trampoline. I did flips backward and forward with the 10-year-old kid. Do you think anybody else did?
I can't see myself doing it.
It was fun. Who cares? Yes, you look like an idiot. So what?
To be a kid, that's the most important thing. Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic. This has been an amazing conversation, Maria. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much for taking the time. I'm sure you'll inspire a whole bunch of other women. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Shuba. It really was fun talking to you.
And that's a wrap for today. Thank you for tuning in. If you find these conversations helpful in your own journey, please subscribe to Seed to Success, our weekly community letter with tips, insights, resources, and more. If you have any other questions relating to startup finance or financial storytelling, send them over to me at chakras@achieve.co. That's chakras@achiiv.co. We'll see you on the next episode of Invisible Ink. Now, go achieve.